Good morning. Monday in DC, everybody getting to travel, running around, getting to hang out. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Chris Hickman. Congratulations, since you don't get to know me. For those of you who do, condolences, you get to deal with me all week. I'm going to be part of the MC for the program this week, and we have got an incredible agenda. I am both shocked and surprised at the number of people that have committed both all of their time and energy to everything that's going on to help this industry proceed, as well as the fact that we have so many different committees, organizations, the work that NIST and SGIP is doing, IEEE, PES, all of the international collaboratives. The amount of activity going on is unprecedented. And for once in my life, and for once in all of our lives as industry participants, it's a little daunting when we see everything that's going on versus kind of the static nature of our industry that we've had for a very long time. Well, I can say that those days are clearly gone. And this collaborative effort that is occurring around the world, not just in our country, is making things move ever faster. The format of the 4 days this week with the different themes for each day ending with acceleration and having the opportunity to see and talk to all the players that are making these significant advances across the spectrum, whether it's legislation, whether it's regulatory policy, or whether it's technology standards. There is so much work going on. And I'm pleased to have the opportunity to be here with you this week and help coordinate. If you guys need anything at all as we move through the week, please don't hesitate to ask. It's not Fashion Week, it's GridWeek. So this is your sign to find anybody that needs help, so here we are. So if you need anything, please don't hesitate to ask. This morning, Stephen Power from the Wall Street Journal sends his regrets. He was our moderator for the panel this morning, but doing his civic duty, he was called to testify this morning, and so he went to do that instead of getting thrown in jail. So, so I think that was a good decision on his part. But he sends his regrets. He really wanted to be here to moderate. I'd like to welcome to the stage our first panel this morning, if you guys want to come on up and get seated. Anto is going to moderate the panel this morning, but this is going to be the kickoff for GridWeek this week. And as Secretary Locke stated, this is an international effort. The amazing things that are happening around the world. We can no longer hide inside of a cocoon of one country, one state, and think that what we're doing isn't tied inextricably to everything that's going on around the world, whether it be standards, fuel, emissions, climate, whatever it is. We have a responsibility that's global now, and an effect that's global from an economic standpoint as well as a climate standpoint. And now we have the opportunity in this forum, which is great, with over 200 delegates coming from an international standpoint this year to join us. So please help me in welcoming our international collaboration panel this morning. And thank you all for being here.
Good morning again. We're hoping to have a really interesting discussion here. I'm going to start off by asking David Velazquez to welcome us to this fine city. So,
good morning, and I'm Dave Velazquez from Pepco Holdings, which is the local utility in the area. So I do want to welcome you both to GridWeek and also to Washington, D.C. I certainly hope that as you have opportunity this week, you get to see more of the city than just than what's contained in these four walls or four blocks. It's our hometown. We're very proud of it. It's a great city. So thank you for being here.
A lot of smart grid happens here, which is obviously why we host GridWeek in Washington, D.C. It seems to be one of the sort of centers of smart grid. What do you say to that?
Pepco Holdings has been in the smart grid journey probably for about 7 years. We started long before there was talk of stimulus money or anything like that. And we've been calling it a journey because that's, if all of you who are involved in it understand, that's really what it is. I mean, it's been transformative, not just inside our four walls, but also is very transformative for our customers as we've begun to roll things out to our customers. If you think about where we are today in the nation's capital here in Washington, we received $45 million of federal stimulus grant money. In the rest of our territories, we received about an additional $123 million to move forward quicker with the smart grid activities. A few weeks ago, we actually began installing smart meters in Washington, D.C. For the past several months, we've been doing the same in Delaware. So we're pretty well into it. We've got our communication infrastructure up. And we're making some great progress, not just, if you will, in the actual technical work, but also I think around the regulatory and business structure that's needed. We've have approval for in Washington, D.C. to decouple our rates from the revenue, which is very important. We've completed a pilot program we called PowerSense DC, which I think will be talked about on one of the days at the conference here, where it was not so much a technical test, but much more a test around consumer response to different pricing schemes. And that was met with, I think, similar results to what some other people have seen, other companies have seen in the country. Basically, customers do respond to price signals, surprise. Beyond that, I think we continue to face some challenges. I think the biggest challenge we face right now is we think about this is what the change is going to mean for our customers, and what the change means from a regulatory perspective, and being able to get all that lined up in a way that customers get the benefits they expect, regulators feel confident that the customers are going to get and realize those benefits. So a lot of progress to date, a lot of work yet to go.
So maybe I can ask you, Lars, to comment on some of the consumer issues that I know Lars is from Dong Energy in Denmark, and you can just interject. Okay.
Thank you very much.
You need to.
Thank you very much, Anto. Yes, and thank you very much for inviting us here. Coming from Dong Energy, coming from Denmark, coming from the European scene, I think actually what is very much on our mind, roadmap-wise, is actually the government's climate commission, who came out 28th of September with a roadmap to a fossil-free Denmark by 2050. And I know over here that may sound a bit pie in the sky, but actually this was a very detailed recommendation working 2.5 years to come up with how we can get rid of fossil fuels in Denmark in a realistic, economical way by 2050. And the question was, yes, indeed we can, and yes, indeed we can reduce CO2 emissions by 85% by 2050 without real increase in cost to the consumer. And this is a combination of significant increase in wind power. We are already at 25% of our power comes from wind power, mainly offshore, and Dong Energy is still the largest operator in the world of offshore wind. And then it's energy efficiency improvements. We actually still believe, and the Commission says, we can reduce energy by at least 40 to 50%. And then, of course, by a number of other measures, including electrical vehicles, and all of this linked together in a smart grid. So we share a similar journey, and actually we also meet in other smart grid forums, like one hosted by IBM. So indeed, this is very much a journey that is becoming more and increasingly international. Thank you.
So from a collaboration point of view, maybe I can throw it open to international collaboration. How is this happening? How do we make this happen? Or is it happening enough? So maybe, Paul, I can throw that to you. Paul Commuti from Siemens.
Yeah, and it's a pleasure for me to be here as well. Well, collaboration internationally, I think the international question, right, is to define smart grid in a more clear way, right? The smart grid has taken on sort of a life of its own and covers, a whole range of technology and approaches. And Siemens being active in, all the major parts of the world, we see different emphasis in different parts of smart grid. So Lars already mentioned the carbon-free Denmark initiative. There's a big driver across the EU on greenhouse gas, which has led smart grid in Europe for us to be a heavy emphasis on the integration of renewables and large-scale renewables, and how do you balance that? Here in the United States, you heard Secretary Locke talk about energy efficiency. So we've had a big emphasis here in the United States in smart grid on that connection between the electric utility and their customers, and how do we drive energy efficiency. In China, they're dealing with rapid increases in demand for electricity, and so the integration of renewables and smartly building out infrastructure. And then in some of the other developed parts of the world, we're working on a lot of off-grid and microgrid solutions where you don't have and probably won't build out large-scale transmission backbones. So, you know, the topic of collaboration takes on a different flavor depending upon where you are. And I think that, you know, really for us in terms of how do you bring the best solutions to the given problem that we're trying to solve under this pretty big umbrella, and we can learn from each other as long as we start by defining what we mean by smart grid when we start that international collaboration.
So collaboration is key to, in an international level, to get to anything like fossil-free by 2050. I don't know, from an international point of view, who outside of Denmark has that kind of ambitions. Any comment to that, David?
Well, I mean, certainly I think with this, I think we're the first where actually, you should remember this is the commission put down by the government, so the government hasn't declared Denmark fossil-free by 2050 yet. But now at least they have a roadmap. Ambition. And ambition and inspiration. And actually we as a company have actually put that even further forward by actually saying that we will actually deliver carbon-free energy by 2040 within one generation. And actually only over the next 10 years changing our total production platform from primarily one of coal to be one primarily of renewables. We're going to halve the carbon emissions from our company. That's going to be 20% of the carbon in the country. So this is doable, it's happening, and I think especially the collaboration that we find, and we're very pleased with, that IBM started, and that actually have players from India, China, Japan, actually France and Europe is teaching us how we will actually move forward also on the standards as was mentioned this morning.
I think you know, one of the keys to the international collaboration has been helped by a number of different vendors who are, you know, certainly need to be part of that collaboration effort. I don't think there's any one group that needs to drive that. And whether we talk about being, you know, 85% carbon reduction by 2050, or you know, in the United States, I think there's different goals. Different countries have different goals. I think part of the reason we're here is those goals are not achievable, I don't believe, without the introduction of the smart grid. And I think that goes all the way from the ability of the smart grid for larger scale projects, but we're also seeing the need for the smart grid when you talk about renewables, you know, for the much smaller projects, even down to the you know, individual residences, small businesses, that you're not going to be able to, we're not going to be able to integrate and effectively use all that, you know, just without the smart grid. And it gets into electric vehicles and what we're able to do with them as well. So the smart grid to me is kind of, you know, however you define it, if you will, it's an umbrella of enabling technologies that's really going to enable us to drive what we need to drive from a renewable standpoint, whatever the goals may be. And I think that collaboration internationally also works domestically and is very important as well. I think, as Lars alluded to, when you start establishing standards and how that's all going to help us collectively move forward.
So you say it's important to define smart grid. Maybe I can throw that to George. Do you think it's important to define it, or you just get on with it?
Well, I think it's very important to define it. And you know, getting back to the theme of collaboration, you know, for people to collaborate, they have to be able to communicate. And in order to communicate, they have to be able to understand a common language. And really, the standards are really, you know, key to creating that common language. I think it's really very simple to understand why this is necessary. You know, the laws of physics don't change from country to country, at least last time I went to school. And for better or for worse, you know, the smart grid has to obey the laws of physics. I mean, it is an electrical infrastructure after all. And so there are also a lot of technical challenges that we need to face as different parts of the world focus on different aspects, you know, integrating renewables, energy efficiency, electric vehicles. And so being able to share learning and best practices and apply them through common standards really helps, you know, the whole, you know, planet move more quickly. The other thing to keep in mind is that many of the suppliers in the smart grid are global companies, right? I think, you know, GE is headquartered in the U.S., but we have ABB, we've got Siemens, NEC, the list goes on. And if different suppliers have to make unnecessary adaptations to their products as they go from market to market, that just adds cost to their products and systems, which gets passed on in higher costs to utilities and eventually higher costs to consumers. So I view the standards as really a key thing that enables collaboration and, in the end, lower costs to consumers.
The Secretary talked about that in terms of seamlessly interoperable throughout the world. I think that's a very key thing. I made a trip around the world in the summer, actually met up in Japan, and it was actually surprising to me that I had to carry a whole bunch of plugs to plug in the power in different countries, and yet I only had to carry an RJ45 or a Wi-Fi that worked everywhere. So I would hope that the smart grid would be more like the data infrastructure rather than the old power infrastructure. That's another experience. So I'm going to put it back to you, George. You've been working tirelessly. I think that was Secretary Locke's comments, and I congratulate you on the award that you've received. Can you talk a little bit more about what you've specifically done and seen in terms of the international collaboration on standards and the adoption of standards and the work that's harmonization going around the world?
Well, one important principle that we've tried to apply is not to reinvent the wheel. And the fastest way to get standards for interoperability is to select standards that already exist. So in our work, we've tried to gather together experts from across the different stakeholder categories, the electric utilities, the different suppliers in the electrical industry, IT, communications, to understand the various use cases to accomplish the various goals that we have in the smart grid, whether it be renewables integration or energy efficiency or electric vehicles, and to develop a high-level, let me say, conceptual model for this. And then what we did was to identify standards that already existed or were under development, and most of these are international standards being developed in organizations like the IEC or ISO or IEEE. And so where we found standards that fit, we just said we're going to adopt these, and where we found standards that needed to be revised, that poses new requirements, which together we can work through these international organizations to create modifications to the international standards that we can all use. So that's the basic approach that we're taking. The organization that Secretary Locke referred to, the Smart Grid Interoperability Panel, we set up to really help the United States figure out what standards we needed as we develop our smart grid. But because we want to have the best minds in the world helping us, and many of our suppliers are companies from outside the U.S., we've invited participation from all around the world in this panel. And at the end of the day, of course, we're looking to international standards bodies to create the actual technical specifications, but through this forum that we've set up, it provides an excellent way for stakeholders to come together and establish what the requirements are.
So, Paul, can you talk from a vendor's point of view and the need for, or the value of seamless interoperability in products?
Well, sure, and I would also compliment George and the team at NIST for the work that they've done, because it has been a pretty pragmatically driven process of adopting standards that existed in the industry and to fill in. And I think the other point that he makes is a really valuable one as well, is that we're trying to do this in the context of real deployments that are ongoing in the United States right now. So to get the advantage of speed and to be pragmatic about it, I think is, it's been a real refreshing process, and probably one that's hard to manage with the number of stakeholders that you have involved in it. So it really has been quite an effort. I think the other part of standards, though, is actually going into the deployments. And this is something in Smart Grid where you'll hear, I'm sure, during the week this week, a lot about this, one of my favorite words, which is pilot projects. And the definition of a pilot, is something that we talk about a lot inside our company as a supplier, because if you've done it somewhere else in the world before, but it happens to be the first of a kind, perhaps in a different region of the United States, is it really a pilot? And so I think one of the things from the supplier side and from the collaboration topic around International collaboration is, as was already mentioned, is to work across the globe to take the best of what's available. And, in Denmark, where there's already a large emphasis on wind, on offshore wind, on HVDC, links in this particular direction, this is something where the rest of the world could actually learn quite a bit. And we can also bring that alongside of the standards development in order to be able to gain speed. And so there's those type of opportunities for collaboration. And so from, really from our perspective, it's not only to get that common, open process around standards, but also to get the first proof of principles behind us as quickly as possible so that we can accelerate the deployment.
So I want to bring you into the discussion, Mr. Morozumi. Satoshi Morozumi is from NEDO in Japan. And I think what's interesting here is that you have a slightly different approach to addressing the future of, and how smart grid. So we've prepared some slides just to help tell the story. So
okay, thank you very much. My name is Satoshi Morozumi, and I prepare some slides for explaining Japanese situation of the smart grid and smart community effort. This is a history of our effort regarding the integration of the renewable energy on our grid systems. Before year 2000, we developed first stage of the renewable energies. Besides this effort, we are starting the grid connection technology for single renewable energy before year 2000. But after the year 2000, we are expecting the high penetration of the renewable energy in the future. So we were starting several large-scale or large number of the renewable energy grid connection technology demonstration project. One of the very famous projects through the from the year 2000 to 2010, it was water project. This is a clustered PV system, installed 550 rooftop PV system on the residential areas. Through such an experience, we are now going to the next stage after the year 2010. We are trying to introduce such a technology to the new community concept named smart community. This concept includes not only the smart grid, but also several changes of the social systems. Okay, so next slide. The most important driver of the smart grid in Japan is high penetration of the renewable energy in near future. Especially photovoltaic, we expecting in year 2030, 25% of the capacity share will be achieved by PV system against the peak load of our domestic grid. So we will face many problems like voltage control or stability of the grid systems, frequency control, or more. So this is one of the reasons NEDO is leading the smart grid activity in Japan. Show next slide, please. One of the very important activity in Japan is organizing of the new alliance of the smart community. This is the name of the named as the Japan Smart Community Alliance. This alliance was started in this April, and now almost 500 participants are. There is a almost 500 participants in this alliance organization, including many companies or universities or other organizations. Main activity of this alliance is discussion about strategy of the future's smart community. Also, we discuss about the standardization regarding such a smart community and smart grid technologies. Why we organize such a alliance is there is no one company can establish all of the system of the smart grid or smart communication. So many companies have a needs to contact with other different type of the companies. So this alliance is a place where such a companies can meet other companies which has other, for example, know-hows. Okay, show next slides. Besides of such an activity of the alliance, NEDO is promoting several demonstration projects domestically and internationally. I can show some of the samples regarding the Asian areas activity of such a demonstration project. About China, we are thinking China is in the economic growth period we experienced in 80s or 70s. Through such a period, we experienced reducing of the load factor of the load profile of the electric systems by the increasing of the, for example, air conditioning. I think that we in China they are facing such a problem. So based on our experience, we would like to promote some demonstration project to avoid such a reducing of the load factor by introducing demand-side management for example, the air conditioning technology or other technology. Also, China is facing the integration problem about renewable energy, especially in northern part of the China. They are facing the transmitting problem from the generating electricity of the wind powers systems. And we would like to show the integration technology using, for example, battery or other energy storage to manage such a congestion of the transmission of the from the so many renewable energies. Also, we are now focusing on introducing smart grid technology in Southeast Asia. In those areas, there are many industry parks which the electricity facility is supplied by independent generating systems. So this is a kind of the island system. So we would like to introduce increasing of the technology which can contribute increasing of the percentage of renewable energy. Also keeps reliability to supply such areas. I think that around the area, public area also has a need to supply electricity from such facilities, and usually connecting to such public systems, the supply reliability is increased. But using some protection technology, we can keep the same level of the reliability, even though connecting on the public utilities. Such kind of technology we would like to demonstration through the smart grid technology in Southeast Asia area. Thank you very much.
So this is great. I mean, the nugget that I got out of that is you're focusing on communities to make them smart communities, because that makes management of demand-side management more possible. I mean, with the utilities, either of you like to comment? I mean, that sounds like a sensible way forward.
Yeah, I think from our standpoint, we believe we're kind of past, I'll say, the pilot phase stage. And, you know, we've done, I think, enough work to say this is something that's going to bring value to both our communities, to our customers, and there's some societal benefits as well. So our proposals to our various commissions in the various jurisdictions are not around pilots anymore, but are much more around let's get on with it and let's start moving forward. I had commented earlier, for instance, we're well on the way that by the second quarter of next year we should have the entire state of Delaware done with smart meters and the communication infrastructure. Next year we hope to also, if not be done, very close to being done with the District of Columbia as well. So I think it's time to, or we feel we can move forward in a much, maybe a little more aggressive way than running pilots at this point.
Yeah, I think energy efficiency measures is certainly very much on our radar screen and have been for many years. I think actually currently we don't have a problem in grid-wise. Currently we have enough capacity both in transmission as in distribution, as we've upgraded the whole distribution transmissions over the last 10 years because of storms and what have you. So we've cable-laid more or less all of that over the last 5 to 10 years. So we are not doing all of this for that reason. We have installed meters to almost every second home in Denmark, but unfortunately, different vendors, different meters. So actually, in our company, we've decided on a different roadmap. So we are building the grid in terms of where do we get most for our money in terms of both climate and economical benefits. And of course, we will have the meters out there, but currently we are spending our time with the customers, on the industrial customers, saving energy efficiency initiatives with the customer demand side management with industrial customers, and we are actually delivering 20 to 30% energy savings with large industrial customers. We now have 50 on what we call climate partnerships. On the retail side, we actually by law have to, as a regulated distribution company, we have to reduce energy consumption by 1% every year with our customers. So that is incentivized, and we are doing that actually. So whereas we see that energy consumption will go down, but as we're transforming our society into preparing for electrical vehicles, heat pumps and what have you, and changing the whole energy platform, that will change the amount of energy being electricity born. So this will be a second electrification of Denmark. And for that reason, we need the smart grid not to invest overly. So the smart meter is going to be part of that. We would very much welcome that we get a standard, just like for the electrical vehicle, we actually have a partnership with Better Place, which I think is known in the US as well, which is this exchangeable battery system where you have to have recharging stations. Standards there are called for as well. So indeed, standards, if this has to be successful across the board, across Europe and across the globe, we definitely need standards. But energy efficiency is very high now and is a huge driver, both on the industrial as well as the retail side.
So, Paul, Siemens work on the supply side and the utility side and also on the consumer side, which plays very nicely into this discussion about the importance of having technologies on the consumer side and not just on the utilities.
Yeah, so I think this is one of the strengths of the company actually, is because we have a pretty good reach on both sides of the meter, if you will. And I think the conversation actually hits at the at the role that international collaboration can really play, right? The experience that we have in different, as an industry, that we have in different facets of what smart grid is all about. And I think the Secretary also referred to it as, and our view is we're kind of reinventing the whole way of power delivery and consumption, whether that's the role of refueling the generation fleet or refueling the transportation fleet, and then how do we move that power, how do we secure that? The communities could be in one aspect being microgrids, and there's different experiences in different parts of the world where this is, might not be as new as it might seem in other parts of the world. And I think what really is changing is this awareness, if you will, between the consumption and the production and trying to keep the system balanced and secure. So this is, clearly an area that we're focused on. And I think we're also at a point where we might not know what the end state looks like, right? I just actually came back over the weekend from Germany and down in Bavaria, where they've had some interesting policy to drive renewables pretty hard. I don't want to insult my German colleagues, but it's usually raining when I'm there, so I'm not exactly sure how the economics worked in stimulating PV in that part of the world. But nonetheless, they have a lot, and because of the climate, the variability of what goes on there is pretty severe, and they have to link that into some sort of demand-side management in order to be able to mitigate out the dynamic nature of what's going on there. So I think that we are going to a new place where we probably don't have all the answers in terms of what that end state looks like. What we do know is the sources of power are distributing, the uses of power are becoming more manageable, and depending upon where you sit in the world, they're already attacking those problems to one extent or another. So the challenge for the industry overall is to make that known, right, and to get that surfaced and to share best practices, because again, my fear continues to be that we won't drive that level of collaboration, and it's going to slow us down. We'll end up having to retrace steps and maybe not be most efficient in deploying our capital, depending upon where you are in the world. And I can only continue to emphasize, our support for the standards that underlie that, with, maybe the exception that we haven't envisioned everything yet, so it's kind of hard to wrap standards around some of it.
So one of the other comments that's made is no one company can do it all. And obviously Siemens is a big company, let's put it that way. And you would support that statement?
I think there's no question. I mean, the scale that we're talking about in any particular part of the world is enormous, right? I mean, we had some conversations here in Washington a couple of weeks ago, and the statements were made that if Alexander Graham Bell came back today, he would have a hard time figuring out exactly what's going on with what he invented. But maybe if Thomas Edison came back, he'd kind of recognize everything that's going on. And the build out just in the United States of the grid is an enormous set of assets that we have deployed. And it's clear that no one company is going to be able to transform the energy future. I mean, that would be an incredibly arrogant thing to believe, even in a company our size. So this is a collaboration, and I also think that this is something that's fundamentally changing the industry, right? If you just look back, in terms of weeks, if you think back, 250 weeks or about 5 years, to think about collaboration in the transmission, distribution, and between the utilities and the consumer was something that may have just been starting to come forward, right? We were pretty set in our ways. Even the events that were held around the grid were pretty small events, maybe around an IEEE meeting or something, but it's, collaboration is the word of the day, but it's also being realized in what we're doing to drive forward, because we have to work together.
So this is exactly the whole point of the Smart Community Alliance, I think.
So I would like to mention one more. Recently, we are feeling of the change of the societies itself. So that's the reason why we are calling smart community. For example, in the rural area of Japan, the share of the car owner is reducing, because central area of the Tokyo, we must pay more than $200 per month for keeping parking space. So now in Japan, there are many retired people increasing now. So some of those people are thinking owning the car is not economical for their life. For example, when they need a car, they should borrow the car instead of owning the car. Such a change is starting in our society. So it is very important that do not misunderstand the change of such a society. for designing the smart grid or smart community. And this is a very important message.
Yeah, there is a company called Zipcar in the US that does exactly that. You can go out and rent a car for an hour or 2 hours just to make a trip and then leave it. It's kind of a community. We actually have the founder of Zipcar speaking on Thursday, so I think that'll be interesting. But I would have thought from a community, societal perspective, I've been to Denmark several times, and it's a pretty sort of not close but very tight community. And I would have thought the community aspect of smart communities would come in very nicely in the Danish society. Does that help this whole process?
Yeah, I think we have experiments like that. We have it. We all see it with sharing bicycles. We see it sharing with electrical mopeds. We see it, and we're going down that road with electrical vehicles now, in principle, with different options. Of course, there's the changeable battery, which is the better place model, and then there are, of course, all the others, which primarily are either charging in the public space or at home. And of course, I think that will be driven in a community-like basis. In Denmark, I think the distribution companies are actually small communities like that, because we're a very small country, only 5 million people, so and we still have 100 distribution companies. So they are very much based on small communities. So standards, again, you'll have different rollouts in every little piece of that very small geography. So yes, indeed, I think we need the experience like that. And this is also how we try to go about the demand side management. So we'll have small pilots or tests with 100, 200, 1,000 customers to see how they respond to dynamic pricing, different kinds of issues in the homes, and trying. We've also tried a number of times with the smart home, but we haven't made it successful yet. So I think maybe that will also be part of the GridWeek. I've seen that on some of the topics. So I think we're still a bit away from the smart home yet. But
so David, are you seeing this sort of interaction with the community or with consumers that's promising, maybe?
And I think that's a very important part of the conversation. When we talk about collaboration, it's not just collaboration among us, as industry participants. And I think as the consumers and the customers get involved in that conversation, that's also what I think is so exciting about collaboration, not just within the country, but internationally, is there's an awful lot going on. This is kind of a brand new space for everybody, companies as well as customers. And I think there will be business models, there'll be benefits, there'll be things that come out that we today can't envision yet. And I think it's very helpful to be able to speed that process up by having conversations like this, to hear what's going on in other places, to understand why that might work, how it might be applicable as well.
So transportation, we've mentioned it several times here, it's clearly a key part of this. I actually think we're going to be pleasantly surprised or shocked, depending on your perspective, that consumers will actually, the rate of pickup of electric vehicles in the US and in the world, I think, will be far greater than we're anticipating. And I know that's going to cause some challenges to the grid. When you effectively can, in the US, buy a pretty reasonable, pretty decent Nissan Leaf for $25,000, and remembering that the average price of cars in the US is $30,000, for commuting purposes, is perfectly satisfactory. I think people are going to start to purchase electric vehicles, and I saw it. I was shocked last couple of weeks hearing the news from the Paris Auto Show. Everything is all about Porsche coming up and Jaguar coming up with incredible sports cars that are electric. And I know, George, you're working, one of the areas within SGIP and NIST is the standardization in that area. How are we going to cope with millions of cars in the next few years?
Well, if we do it in a smart way, it should be no problem at all. There was one estimate that said you could replace about 70% of the U.S. Fleet of cars and light trucks with electric vehicles without adding any new generation to the grid if you could just charge them during off-peak hours. So obviously there are issues dealing with the distribution environment, but at least in terms of the generation, electric vehicles have a great, the idea of being able to charge them at night using wind, when there's no other use for it is just great. And the prospect, assuming that battery technology improves, of using the batteries on the vehicles to provide distributed storage for the grid to aid with the balancing and frequency regulation. There's all kinds of great possibilities down the road.
Are you getting into electric vehicles and charging stations?
Yeah, so, well, yeah, I would say in a relatively large way. In fact, we just announced over the last couple of weeks that we're putting a fleet of 100 cars out in Germany to get some firsthand experience in all the elements that you have to consider, I guess, with the, sort of refueling of the transportation. I think George makes an interesting point that, if you can do it in off-peak, which, implies that we have a lot more managed situation for when loads are actually managed in the grid. And another, thing of concern, I would say, with regard to the electric vehicles per se, is their range limitation, which would put them, probably more useful in a city environment than in a rural environment. And typically our renewable generation in cities is a lot higher because you just don't have the density to get large-scale renewables. So there's a number of different elements at play with regard to how you're going to make electric vehicles work. I think at the first time, not work in terms of the technology, but sort of the business model, because you have to, we have to get large-scale renewables into the cities in order to power this fleet of electric vehicles where they're most useful. And then we would have to shift the charging those vehicles off-peak in order to be able to avoid, a pretty dramatic rebuild of the T&D network in order to make it useful. So, yeah, Siemens is involved in all parts of this. We think that the infrastructure for electric vehicles needs to be smart, and it also needs to be driven off of standards, right? Because it depends on your aggressiveness with regard to a forecast of electric vehicles. And, I think it's a very exciting time, actually, for the industry to be witnessing what happens. Historically, we have typically overestimated in the short term and underestimated in the long term what the impact of something like an electric vehicle will be. And we're, later this year, actually, we'll be starting to see the first impact. So it's an exciting time.
So in Japan, what is your expectations of electric vehicle impact?
We are now expecting several problems. For example, if the V2G technology is established, I think the rate system of the utility or regulation must be confused by this technology. Well, for example, if such a technology can be established, the people can charge the cheaper point and bring the electricity to the home. So such kind of the thing will, I think that, so thinking about such a situation, we must invest information system beside of the utility systems. And I think the contract base is now it's a site-based contract, but we need new contract systems like user-based or such a kind
roaming.
of
Roaming, just like the cell phones used to.
Yeah, such kind of innovation must be needed if such a technology is spread.
But you need interoperability for that, obviously. That's stating the obvious.
Yes.
Are you starting to think about some of these issues from utility, roaming, people moving vehicles?
I think as we've invested in Better Place in Denmark, and I think Denmark is probably going to be the second go-ahead after Israel, where Better Place is started. Indeed, the roaming aspect, the whole standardization is currently being discussed, and hopefully it'll be solved before the year end, and there will be standards on this issue. We believe that there will be many options. There will also be biofuel cars, there will also be hybrids, but EV is going to play a significant role. We actually expect 20% of the car park to be electrical vehicles by 2025 in Denmark.
What percentage, sir?
20%. So that's quite high, but in Denmark, again, only on average 95% of daily usage can actually be handled by 160 kilometers or 100 miles, which can be done by one charge. So to us, the key issue is the smart charging. smart charging in terms of doing it off-peak. And this is why we've gone into this road, because of the wind, because this is actually fits extremely well with our high proportion or market share of wind.
Yeah, so in light of this, we actually, at the very late stage at the GridWeek, decided to add the EV Grid Summit on Thursday. It's actually come together very nicely in the last 4 or 5 weeks, and we've been working with NIST and ITA and EPRI and other organizations, and that should be an interesting conversation. Just one last comment. I'm repeating myself. I think the take-up of electric vehicles is going to surprise us all. And one anecdote I can give to that is I was at Washington Reagan Airport waiting to go home a few weeks ago, and sitting at the Starbucks just waiting for my flight. I was just overhearing a conversation in the next table of 2 gentlemen. Obviously, they're not in this industry. They were arguing or discussing which electric vehicles they're going to get, talking about Volt and talking about hybrid. And so when we start to have conversations by regular lay people, as it were, about which electric vehicles they want, I think we're going to start to see some interesting perspectives. Sort of coming to a close, is there any other sort of perspective that you want to bring out that we've missed in this discussion? George, let's start with you.
Well, I just want to echo something that a couple of people have said, that as we look forward, it's hard to predict today where we're going to wind up. And if you look back at our experience in communications and the internet and what life was like 25 years ago, very few of us could have imagined that today you'd be carrying around your smartphone and be able to get 500 channels of high-definition TV on your smartphone anywhere, right? It was inconceivable. And so as we think ahead, not only in terms of modernizing the electric grid, but I think Japan's concept of looking at sort of resource management in a larger sense, and maybe tying in intelligent transportation and so forth. I think if we do this right, it could really create a very, very exciting future where we can have a more, even better lifestyle and economy, and use a lot less resources in the process.
I think thinking about what's possible, or is really important here. I'll tell a story about back in the early 90s. I was living in the UK, and I was riding a train or the underground, and I remember reading one of the Evening Standard newspapers, and there was an article in there about, this is when the internet was just starting, about ordering pizza on internet. And I was looking at this and said, you've got to be crazy. How do you do that? Right? And obviously I hadn't quite figured out that you link in all of these different systems. That's really what the internet is. And so I think there's a lot of things that may be said that you could react to, this must be crazy, but maybe it's not so crazy. So open your mind. So maybe provide you another chance to give some last remarks.
Yeah, I would reiterate that I think it's a pretty exciting time to be involved in energy topics in the world right now, right? This is, for us around electrical energy production, consumption, the changes, how we're linking that together, how we're making it smart. And, I think some of our experience in building infrastructure for the internet is that you don't get there. It's not always a happy a walk through the woods, right? It has challenges, it has ups and it has downs. But I think generally speaking, we're really excited about the prospects because the whole system needs to remake itself. We want to be part of that. I think it's going to be driven in a lot of different directions, and the ride should be good. And the only comment that I would make is when you said you overheard people at Starbucks at the airport here in Washington, that might not be reflecting what's actually going on around the United States.
Yes, maybe. Good point.
I think that things are moving in a direction. It's going to move in fits and starts, but we're headed to a new way for the energy future in America and the world.
Okay. Satoshi, that's the last comments.
Recently, Japanese companies recognized the importance of the creating use case through the demonstration project. So I think that we can prepare many use cases based on the Japanese experience. So such an effort, we can collaborate. We can collaborate with international standardization about the smart grid or smart community technology.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Lars.
Well, indeed, I find it very exciting times. I think only 10 years ago, very few utilities would travel the world to meet other colleagues to discuss what's going to happen next year. This is happening all over the place now. I think it's very exciting to be in this industry now. And I think as well, we all talk about growth. I mean, in the US, the story is about how do we get the growth. The clean tech market currently is estimated at $600 billion globally now by 2007. In only 13 years, it's estimated to be $2,000 billion. So this is a good area for growth as well. So I think it has a lot of good stories. And on top of that, it actually adds to the security of supply to a lot of us. So very exciting times. Looking forward to the further collaboration.
David.
This is a very exciting time, and I think, you know, with our discussion and as you continue to have discussions this week, you know, one comment I would make as we've gotten more and more into it is that we need to keep remembering that this is all about the ultimate customer, whether it's, you know, electric vehicles, we talk about acceptance, what form that's going to take, whether it's about different aspects of the smart grid. When you think about the internet and how that's evolved, it's evolved because of what customers need and want. And as much, I'm an engineer, and it's exciting to talk about the technology, to get involved in it, but I think we really need to keep that focus on the customer, the ultimate person who's going to use all this, and how do we make it accessible, easy to use, help them understand that this helps drive, you know, both a healthier, a cleaner, you know, a more safe environment for them and their children. So.